Kryptonite is noteworthy because it makes Superman, the Man of Steel, controllable, and that is exactly why Lex Luthor becomes obsessed with it. Because when Superman first arrived in Metropolis, he completely disrupted the existing power structure. He cannot be bought, he doesn't answer to anyone, and he operates outside of the established rules. So Luthor did what he always does, he looked for a way to reassert himself, and Kryptonite is his solution. Kryptonite is important not just because it weakens Superman, but because it standardizes him. In practical terms, it brings him back into the same system of power that governs everyone else, and that's why Luthor values it so highly. In A Little Piece of Home, the story acts as far more than a superhero versus poisonous rock story. At its core, this story is all about power, who has it, who wants it, and what they're willing to do to keep it. The episode primarily focuses on two figures, Superman and Lex Luthor, but it also tells us a lot about the people that orbit them. Superman is accustomed to near invincibility, while Luthor is accustomed to absolute control brought about through wealth and ruthlessness. There are also secondary figures like the debuting Mercy Graves, Luthor's competent bodyguard/driver, who is used to being the most deadly person in the room. And then there's Joey, the Rocketeer-looking cocky thief who thinks very highly of himself, and they all have their own role to play in the story. They are contrasted with more positive figures like Lois Lane, Professor Hamilton, and even Luthor's employee Professor Peterson, whose ethical clarity contrasts sharply with the overconfident villains. Superman begins the episode confident in his own abilities. He confronts a pair of small-time crooks robbing Luthor's museum, assuming that it'll be an easy task. He is so accustomed to success that the idea that he might fail doesn't even enter his mind. This overconfidence comes crashing down when he nears the display of minerals in the museum, a display that unknowingly contains a piece of kryptonite. This fragment of his destroyed homeworld drains him of his strength immediately, leaving him helpless on the museum floor. The only reason he escapes is because his opponents are unprepared to capitalize on it, and frankly, they seem weirded out by it. It might seem like an odd weakness to have, maybe even a little contrived, but this follows a long tradition of heroes with specific, unusual weaknesses. But here it serves a structural purpose. It redistributes power in the story. Superman's assumption that he is untouchable is suddenly pulled out from underneath him, but this vulnerability is not a mere plot device. It's a vehicle for Superman to grow from. Lesser figures, like Lex Luthor, lash out in anger when their power is taken away from them, but not Superman. Rather than lessening him, instead he grows, learning to rely on quick thinking and collaboration instead of just brute strength. So in that sense, the thing that weakens him really makes him stronger. Once kryptonite is introduced, he can no longer rely on being the most powerful person in the room. Instead, he starts operating more like a problem solver than a force of nature. This shift shows that his effectiveness isn't dependent on strength alone. And what's really important here is that this isn't a complete reinvention of the character. Superman was never just a blunt instrument. He simply didn't need to rely on those other skills before. Kryptonite forces him to engage them though. Observation, restraint, and collaboration. These qualities were always there, and they've now become necessary. And really, this highlights the key difference between Superman and Luthor. When Superman loses power, he accepts it and he adapts. When Luthor loses it, he rages and tries to cage it. A big part of Superman's growth comes from Lois Lane too. She is someone who confronts the powerful and exposes the truth, which is a very different kind of power to Superman or Luthor's. Lois operates outside the physical power structure of the episode, which is exactly what makes her effective. Where Superman initially fails to recognize danger, Lois processes it and acts on it almost immediately. When a weakened Superman tells her that the museum's cups are made out of lead, she uses them to shield the kryptonite and neutralize its effect. The dinosaur was blocking her path, so she simply threw the kryptonite into the cup, allowing Superman to regain enough strength to defeat the mechanical Tyrannosaurus. Luthor, by contrast, is far more insidious and destructive. Lex Luthor, the owner of the museum and a man of enormous intellect, is presented as the archetype of immoral arrogance. The museum itself, filled with fossils, extinct species, and exhibits of dead civilizations, is also pretty allegorical. History is filled with examples of individuals and societies that lost control despite their power, including Krypton. Yet Luthor ignores all of these warnings. He sees kryptonite obsessively as a means to control Superman, oblivious to the fact that the radiation is slowly killing him, foreshadowing the terminal cancer he develops by the time of Justice League. It's all the more ironic that one of the key displays in his museum is all about an indigenous tribe who were killed off because of their consumption of lead. Kryptonite allows him to define the terms of engagement and decide when Superman is strong and when he isn't. So he offers Superman a deal. He can still be the hero he wants to be, he just needs to steer clear of Luthor's operations or else. But to Superman this is a non-starter, so Luthor pledges to kill him. And as far as he's concerned, the radiation is harmless to humans, so he puts the mineral to use in multiple ways, demonstrating a persistent refusal to heed warnings from both history and science. First, he uses a chunk to power Metallo, effectively ruining John Corbin's life in the process. Second, he uses Kryptonite for personal protection, creating a dangerous aura of invincibility around himself. And finally, he develops weaponry specifically designed to take out Superman, from the Kryptonite bomb to the lethal Kryptonite injection, as seen in the series finale Legacy. Luthor's hoarding perfectly demonstrates his arrogance, possessing knowledge and power, but remaining blind to consequences, confident that he alone can control forces that have destroyed civilizations before. This arrogance can be seen in those that orbit him too. Joey, a thief for hire, is inexperienced and confident. However, since Superman arrived, Metropolis has become a no-go zone for people like him. When he eventually lures Superman into the Kryptonite trap, he seems to have gained the upper hand. Yet his overconfidence becomes his undoing. Joey attacks with reckless bravado, moving the fight away from the Kryptonite and towards the edge of the building. Each swing chips away at the advantage he thought he had, ultimately causing him to tumble into the canal alongside Superman. Joey's defeat is a vivid consequence of overestimating one's control and how it leads to downfall. He serves as a narrative foreshadowing of Luthor's eventual downfall, showing that arrogance undermines both the powerful and the petty alike. As a counterweight to this, you have those with intellectual power. Professor Hamilton uses his power of knowledge to tell Lois and Superman how to neutralize the threat of Kryptonite. Simply encase it in lead. Similarly, Professor Peterson, one of Luthor's scientists who first studies Kryptonite, acts responsibly, seeking to prevent disaster by warning Lois Lane and getting the message to Superman. He is fully aware of the risks involved, but is committed to doing the right thing. Until he gets caught. Unlike Lois Lane, who defies people in power, Peterson crumbles. Peterson's role highlights a different aspect of power, knowing what's right but lacking the ability to act on it. Unlike Luthor or Superman, Peterson doesn't get to decide how power is used, he can only react to it. His death reinforces the idea that power doesn't just affect those who wield it, it also determines the fate of those who do not. Before his murder, he is forced to lure Superman and Lois into Luthor's museum trap. And can I just say, I really enjoy the metaphor here of Superman facing off with a mechanical dinosaur in the House of History. Superman, as the last survivor of Krypton, is confronted by extinction brought to life through human ambition. The juxtaposition of a living being against animated relics of the dead is pretty interesting. The fact that Luthor is the one controlling the mechanical dinosaur shows us how he is playing God, bringing back an extinct species to fight with the last survivor of another long-gone civilization. That is symbolically pretty rich and tells you so much about Lex Luthor. Superman and Lois's eventual victory shows us how the pair overcome physical weakness and danger by being adaptable, ethical, and working together. Ultimately, a little piece of home is less about Kryptonite as a weakness and more about how power is gained, used, and lost. Kryptonite is the mechanism that redistributes power, and each character reveals something different in response to that shift. Superman loses his advantage and adapts. Joey gains power and wastes it. Peterson understands the danger but can't act on it. Luthor is the only one who gains power and becomes more dangerous because of it. He doesn't treat Kryptonite as a tool, but as something to accumulate and rely on. He ignores the risks, ignores the warnings, and assumes control is something that he can maintain indefinitely. And that's the point the episode makes. Power does not just corrupt, it also reveals. When the balance shifts, each character shows who they are. Luthor is the only one who never changes, and that's what defines him, the most powerful man in Metropolis, and the one least capable of understanding its limits. Okay, that's it for this essay. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell all your friends about me. You know how YouTube works. If you really liked the video and feel like tossing $1 or $2 my way, please consider using the thanks button, because every little helps. And if you have really enjoyed my work, you might want to pick up a copy of my book Rogues Gallery. It features 22 essays on villains from Batman the Animated Series. There's a beautiful cover by Batman the Animated Series background artist John Calmette, a foreword by director Dan Reber, and a moving segment from the late Kevin Conroy sharing his thoughts on life, love and loss. Plus an exclusive essay on the Condiment King that will never be made into a video. Rogues Gallery is available worldwide on Amazon, both digitally and in softcover. Finally, channel memberships are just $1.99 a month and give you early access to my essays, custom emojis, and your name featured on my members end screen, which has been rolling for a little while now. Huge thanks to everyone who's already part of this. You've helped to make these videos possible. If you want to see your name up here too, join the channel now. And while I have your attention, please consider checking out my other channel, Serum Lake Comics, where I talk about mostly DC comic books. Next time. On Friday, just ahead of American Mother's Day, I want to talk about a villainous matriarch from Batman Beyond, who shows exactly how not to be a parent. Yes, it is a deep cut, but we're going to be talking about Ma Mayhem. And next Monday, I want to use an episode of the new Batman Adventures to discuss how our fears fester and build up in our minds, but rarely happen. Yes, we're going to talk about the episode Over the Edge. Hope to see you then.